Welcome to the Black Dog Cafe, where we're celebrating the original Happy Face, Vladimir Mayakovsky. How about a nice round of enthusiastic enthusiasm? A stray dog is in the house. Stray dog, thank you about that. We're really excited about the book. We're more excited to have live people here who are going to stick the book in your ear. And we are thrilled to be continuing our collaboration with the Poetry Society of America. So, without further ado, here's Vladimir Mayakovsky.
Thanks for coming out for this. This is, I'm going to give a quick introduction, then get out of the way. I put the book together, this book, Night Wraps the Sky, out of a feeling that Mayakovsky had been out of print in English for too long. There aren't many editions that you can get in a bookstore, and there aren't many translations that seem to give the energy and the power of the poems that I suspected was lying there. So I recruited some people to make new translations, and I gathered translations I liked, and writing by and about Mayakovsky that make a kind of composite portrait of the man. And I'd rattled together a big introduction, but I'm going to try to compress it. In my research, I came across the fact that Mayakovsky had commonly read his verse in bars with a cigarette in his mouth and a piano suspended over his head, dangling from ropes. And I thought of trying to duplicate that here, but there's smoking laws, and you can't really do that now. And the best I could do to approximate it was to gather some really strong readers. And I felt lucky that many of the people who contributed to the book are terrific readers. And in addition to that, I had a couple friends who are pitching in, who have a kind of distant relationship to Soviet literature and to Mayakovsky, or maybe not that distant. I think of Martha Plimpton as an honorary Russian after seeing her in Tom Stoppard's trilogy, for which she was nominated for a Tony. And Campbell Scott, I think of as a kind of an honorary genius after seeing him play Mayakovsky in a play that Mayakovsky wrote called Vladimir Mayakovsky, or Vladimir Mayakovsky, a tragedy. And I thought it was an impossible role, and Campbell pulled it off beautifully. That was many years ago, and I'm glad to lure him into this, to reincarnate himself as Mayakovsky again. I'm very grateful to be invited here by the Poetry Society, by Alice Quinn. Farrar, Straus and Giroux was very kind to me in putting this book together. Specifically, Lauren Stein, as an editor, was hugely patient and wise for many years. I'm sure I'm forgetting to thank many people, and I don't really want to rattle on too much, though. This should be a kind of self-contained evening where we're ricocheting from prose about Mayakovsky, prose written by Mayakovsky, mainly from his autobiography, which he wrote in 1922, and then poems that will declare themselves as we go. We didn't rehearse. There's room for confusion, and a kind of futuristic mayhem, I think, if we're lucky, will ensue. But I'm glad we had some Ramones music to start it off. I think there's going to be a slideshow shuttling along to pace the reading, too. Ron Padgett will begin with his amazing adaptation of Mayakovsky's very last poem, which Ron calls Screaming My Head Off. And Ron will conclude with the only poem not by Mayakovsky. It's by Frank O'Hara and was found in O'Hara's papers after he died, and it's a direct tribute to Mayakovsky. And in between, there's all sorts of stuff. I hope you have a good time. Thanks you very much for coming.
Michael called this an adaptation. I'm glad he said that instead of translation, because I don't really speak Russian. In fact, I don't speak Russian. And also, I just want to say that I did this adaptation 40 years ago when I was too young to know better. Thank God. Screaming my head off. You people of the future, running back over the past, shining a light back over your shoulder, you'll probably want to learn about me, Mayakovsky. Your scholars will say the veins stood out on my neck and I was pissed off. Hey, professor, get that bicycle off your nose. Here's my story. I'm a health inspector and water boy, swimming in blood before I was wet behind the ears. My tears had fallen on my poems that bloomed like flowers, like Mary's flowers in Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? Some poets dribble and others serve towels with their showers. That's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. And they keep rolling along. And those mandolins again. Da-dee, da-dee, da-dee. So what if a statue of me grows out from a big rose in a square where whores with rough trade in a clap spit patooey? I've had every kind of bullshit up to here. Give me one love song. They're nice and they get the money. Anyway, I thought I was smart putting my foot in my own mouth. Get that. Straight from the blabbermouth. Great scream of poetry. My books are going straight toward you. Together you will speak back and forth. I'll be there soon, a mad communist. Not like a Prince Charming out of Essenine. My poems will fly over the ears of our time, the heads of state. My poems will come not like the frail arrow leaving Cupid's bow, not as the penny comes to the trembling coin collector, not like the light from a dead star. No, they will come hard and heavy as a giant jaw cut out of rock, the way an aqueduct goes on forever. You will come across them in the used bookstore, lines hard and straight as an ionic column. My poems don't powder the ears or nibble the earlobes of some pretty young girl. Shit, no. My poems jump out like mad gladiators. Kill, they cry, hand to hand and head to head, and the words fly out like bullets exploding in your brain. You see, I'm giving it all away, everything to you, workers of the world. Any friend of yours is a friend of mine, and too bad for the rest. You can move hard and fast when you're starving and blood is flying. Books by Marx and Engels were great, but we didn't have to read them because we knew where we stood. So don't give me Hegel and his dialectic. It smashed its head together, and the sounds of the skulls cracking was poetry, like fame and genius going down the same drain. Okay, poems go down the drain too. Hundreds of trillions of people down the drain into heaven. To hell with statues and monuments. We're famous enough. Our monument is built with moving blood. Socialism. So go look them up in your dictionary. Jack off, mutation, underground. For you who can afford to be healthy, I've had to sing with the big blue tongue of death. To you, I must look like some flying prehistoric lizard. Well, life, let's go. Go talking our heads off about the 5-year plan. I don't have a red cent, and the furniture never came, but all I need is a clean shirt. I couldn't care less when I show up in CKK, radiant and in the future. I'll raise all the books of my poems over the heads of the creeps.
Hello. Everybody is right about Mayakovsky. In the 13 volumes of his complete works, about 1/3 consists of fulminations on patriotic and political themes. Another third is composed of serious revolutionary poems, which are quite original in their genre, and which still today can evoke some of the fervor of the early years of the Bolshevik Revolution. What remains are his satiric plays and his lyrics on the themes that were central to Mayakovsky's life, a man's longing for love and his suffering at the hands of the loveless, his passion for life and his desolation in a hostile and inhuman world, his yearning for the absolutes of human experience, and his rage at his impotent self. From the introduction of The Bedbug, and selected poetry of Mayakovsky edited by Patricia Blake.
This is from I Myself. These are excerpts from Mayakovsky's autobiography. Roots of Romanticism. The first house is clearly remembered. 2 floors, the top one ours, the bottom one a winery. Once a year, carts of grapes, pressed. I eat, they drink. All of this in the territory of the ancientest Georgian fortress near Baghdadi. Around the fortress, a rectangular old wall. In the corners, stands for cannons. Inside the walls, turrets. Beyond the wall, trenches. Beyond the trenches, forests and jackals. I grew older, ran to the highest peak. I daydreamed. This is Russia. Its pull on me was intense.
Illicitness. My sister moved back from Moscow. She was ecstatic, secretly gave me leaflets, enjoyed it, very risky. Can still remember the first. Wake up, comrade, wake up, brother, throw your rifle to the ground. This was the revolution. This was poetry. Poetry and the revolution somehow united in my head.
1906. Father died. Pricked his finger, sewing book bindings. Blood poisoning. Since then, can't stand pins. Prosperity ended. After Father's funeral, we had 3 rubles. Feverishly and instinctively sold all of our tables and chairs. Moved towards Moscow. Why? We didn't know anyone there.
The arrest. Caught in a raid in Cuisine, our illegal printing press. Ate the notebook, a bound one with addresses. They let me off with a reprimand.
Second arrest. Our lodgers were digging a tunnel under the Taganka prison, freeing female prisoners. Succeeded in setting up a bust. They took me in. At my house, they found a revolver and other illegal stuff. Didn't want to be in there. Tantrumed, transferred from station to station, and finally, Butirki, solitary confinement number 103.
Report of the prison governor, August 17, 1909. Confidential. Vladimir Vladimirovich Mayakovsky, held under guard in the prison under my administration, by his behavior incites other prisoners to disobedience with regard to prison officers, insistently demands of guards free access to all cells purporting to be the prisoner's leader. Whenever he is let out of his cell to go to the lavatory or washroom, he stays out of his cell for half an hour, parading up and down the corridor. Mayakovsky does not pay attention to any of my requests concerning order. On August 16, when permitted to go to the lavatory at 7 p.m., he began to walk up and down the corridor, going up to the other cells and demanding that the guard open them. When asked by the guard to go back to his cell, he refused. In order to be able to let others go to the lavatory one by one, the guard began to ask him categorically to go into his cell. Mayakovsky called the guard a lackey and began to shout in the corridor so that he could be heard by all prisoners, "Comrades, a lackey is driving your leader to his cell." In this way, he incited all the prisoners, who in their turn became noisy. I arrived there with the officer on duty and restored order. I wish to inform the security department of this incident and humbly beg for an order authorizing the transfer of Mayakovsky to another prison.
David Burlyuk. Burlyuk appeared at the Stroganov Art Institute. Had an arrogant air about him. Lorgnette, frock coat. Walks around humming. I began picking on him. We almost came to blows.
In the smoking room. Social event. Concert. Rachmaninoff. Isle of the Dead. Ditched it because of the unbearably melodic boredom. A minute later, so did Burlyuk. We both had a good laugh about it. We left to go for a walk together.
Memorable night. David has the anger of a master that has surpassed his contemporaries. I have the pathos of a socialist. knowing the inevitability of the collapse of old ways. Russian futurism was born.
Next, I made a poem during that day. That is, fragments, bad ones, published nowhere. Night, Sretinsky Boulevard. Read lines of it to Burluk, adding that they were from a friend of mine. David stopped, looked me over, barked. But you wrote this yourself. You are a genius. Applying such a grandiose and undeserved epithet to me made me giddy. I immersed myself fully in poetry. That evening, completely unexpectedly, I became a poet.
Things get going. Newspapers began to fill up with futurism. The tone wasn't all too polite. For example, they simply called me a son of a bitch.
The yellow blouse. I never had any suits, had 2 blouses, hideous things. There's a tried and true method to sprucing up any outfit, a tie. No money, took a yellow ribbon from my sister, tied it around myself. A huge to-do. Therefore, the most noticeable and beautiful thing about a person is a tie. Apparently, the bigger the tie, the bigger the to-do. And as the size of a tie has its limitations, I went about things with some creativity. I made a shirt out of ties, and a tie out of shirts. The impression it made was irresistible.
This is Mayakovsky's Flops jacket in my translation. I will sew myself black trousers from the velvet of my voice, a yellow jacket out of 3 lengths of sunset. Down the Nevsky Mon, down its polished latitudes I'll step along like Don Weil in Profile. Let the earth cry out, all sissy soft from slumber, you're off to great green spring itself. As for the sun, I'll offer an obnoxious grin and say, look how the pavement rolls me along like a French R. And isn't it because the sky is blue, and the earth is my lover girl in birthday clothes that I can give you poems, jolly ones like Bee by Boat, and sharp and needful ones like toothbrushes? Ladies, lovers of my prime cuts. And that girl over there was looking at me like I was her brother. Bury me in tossed smiles. I'll sew your garlands into a fop's jacket.
A fun year. Traveled around Russia. Lectures often ended abruptly in mid-sentence when the police would burst in and break them up. The publishers wanted nothing to do with us. Their capitalistic noses sensed our volatility. No one bought a single line. Returning to Moscow, mostly I lived on the boulevards. This time was concluded with the tragedy Vladimir Mayakovsky, put on in Petersburg, Luna Park. People hissed holes in it.
Vladimir Mayakovsky, A Tragedy. Characters. Vladimir Mayakovsky, a poet, 20 to 25 years old. The enormous woman, his lady friend, 15 to 20 feet tall. She does not speak. Old man with scrawny black cats, several thousand years old. Man with one eye and one leg. Man with one ear. Man without a head. Man with a long, drawn-out face. Man with 2 kisses. Conventional young man. Woman with a tiny tear. Woman with a tear. Woman with a great big tear. Newsboys, child kisses, etc. Old man with one shorn cat.
Prologue, spoken by Mayakovsky. Can you understand why I, quite calmly, through a hailstorm of jeers, carry my soul on a platter to be dined on by future years? On the unshaven cheek of the plazas, trickling down like a useless tear, I may well be the last poet there is. Have you noticed, dangling above the pebbled paths, the striped face of boredom, hanged? And on lathery necks of rushing rivers, bridges wringing their iron hands. The sky is weeping, uncontrollably, loudly. A cloud, its little mouth twisted, is looking wry, like a woman expecting a baby to whom God has tossed an idiot, blind in one eye. With swollen fingers sprouting reddish hairs, the sun has caressed you with a gadfly's persistence. In your souls, a slave has been kissed to death. I, undaunted, have borne my hatred for sunlight through centuries, my soul stretched taut as the nerves of a wire. I am king of lights. Come to me, you who ripped the silence, you who howled because the nooses of noon were too tight. I will reveal to you with words as simple as bellowing our new souls, humming like the arcs of streetlights. I shall merely touch your heads with my fingers, and you will grow lips for enormous kisses and tongues native to all peoples. Then I, my shabby soul hobbling, shall go off to my throne with the starry holes in the worn-out dome. I'll lie down, radiant, clothed in laziness, on a soft couch of genuine dreck. And quietly kissing the knees of the cross ties, the wheel of a locomotive will embrace my neck. Epilogue spoken by Mayakovsky. I wrote all this about you, poor drudges. It's too bad I had no bosom. I'd have fed all of you like a sweet little old nanny. But right now, I'm a bit dried up and a little bit touched in the head. On the other hand, who'd have given his thoughts such inhuman latitude? Who and where? It was I who stuck my finger into the sky. I proved that he's a thief. Sometimes it seems to me that I'm a Dutch rooster, or else a Scovian king. But at other times, what pleases me more than anything is my own name. Vladimir Mayakovsky.
Good evening. My name is Clement Joseph, and I should introduce myself because I'm by far the most obscure person on this stage. But I'd just like to give very briefly a little context to this poem I'm going to read. First, I'll butcher it in Russian, and then I'll give you the English version. It's called Vam, and it was written in 1915 when Mayakovsky was the handsome 22-year-old that he boasts of being in a cloud in pants. But of course, it was also one of the worst, most savage years for the fighting during the First World War. And so Mayakovsky is, you can imagine him standing outside a bar, a famous establishment for the wealthy and chic in Petrograd, and so writing his poem, Vam. Вам, проживающим за оргию, имеющим ванную и теплый клозет, как вам не стыдно о представлении к Георгию вычитывать из столбцев газет? Знаете ли вы, издарные, многие, думающие нажраться лучше как, может быть, сейчас бомби ноги выдрала у Петрова поручка. Если он, приведенный на убой, вдруг увидел израненный, как вы, измазанной в котлете губой, похотливо напиваете северянина, вам ли, лупящим баб да блуда, жизнь отдавать в году? Я лучше в баре бладьем буду подаваться на ночную воду. Before I read the English version, the translation is by Katya Pekina. I should say it makes reference to a poet called Severyanin. This is Igor Severyanin, a man who I think was named Lotaryov, but he renamed himself Severyanin, the man of the north in Russia. And he was a man with a fascinating hairdo and a real talent for atrocious poetry. He was, Mayakovsky wouldn't like us to say that it was a rival, it was more a contemporary poet of his. So he actually also comes in for some abuse in a clown in pants if you read the book. So you can just take him as a byword for everything pretentious and vulgar. So here we are from 1915. For you. You, wasting away from orgy to orgy, owning a bathtub and a heated toilet. Aren't you ashamed, scanning through St. George's Awards in the columns of the newspapers? Do you, talentless masses, thinking only of stuffing your faces, ever consider that maybe, just now, the legs of Petrov the lieutenant are being torn off by a bomb? And what if he, delivered for slaughter in shreds, suddenly saw your lips greased with meat and lasciviously humming Severiana? To give a life for you, lovers only of food and fucking, I'd rather serve pineapple liquor to whores at the bar.
From Mayakovsky's Last Loves by Francine Duplessis-Gray. There was a strong streak of masochism in Mayakovsky, and the woman he fell in love with in 1915 seems to have been invented to satisfy it. Her name was Lilia Lily Yurevna Brick. Mayakovsky's sexual relationship with Lily lasted only approximately from 1915 to 1923, but his close friendship with her husband, Osip, created a bond with both Bricks that far transcended any sexual attachment. For the rest of his life, Osip Brick remained the poet's most trusted advisor, his most fervent proselytizer, and also a co-founder with Mayakovsky of the most dynamic avant-garde journal of the early Soviet era, Left Front of Art.
The two men rose ahead of Lily in the mornings and had long conversations over breakfast. Before leaving the flat, Mayakovsky came up to Osip and kissed him on top of the head, saying, "I kiss your little baldness." Mayakovsky's liaison with Lily, however, was as tormented as his friendship with Osip Brick was serene. Mutual friends remained amazed throughout the following years by the despotic manner in which she treated him and the fearful obsequiousness with which this dynamic, seemingly powerful man catered to his mistress's every wish. "If I'm a complete rag, use me to dust your staircase," he wrote her in one particularly self-abasing letter.
From Mayakovsky and His Circle by Viktor Shklovsky. Everybody spurned the poet, wounded him, and here at last, home and a contract with Brick, half a ruble for every line, forever, and tomorrow he publishes. Lily Brick cut Mayakovsky's hair, told him to wash himself, gave him a change of clothing. He began to carry a heavy stick. Lily had brown eyes, a large head, is beautiful, red-haired, light, wants to become a dancer.
I wanted to, I'm going to read my translation of Oblak of Stanach, Cloud and Pants. Actually, just part of it because it's a long poem. Before that, I just wanted to recite the short poem in Russian for you that is the first poem that made me really love Mayakovsky. Maybe also because it was short. Я сразу смазал карту будня, плеснувши краски из стакана. Я показал на блюде студня косые скулы океана. На чешуе жестяной рыбы прочел я зовы новых губ. А вы, ноктюрн сыграть, могли бы на флейте водосточных труб? That's one of his earlier poems. Do you have a translation of that in the book? Could you play a nocturne on the sequel? Okay, the sequel next time. So this is part one from Cloud and Pants in the translation. You think I'm delirious with malaria? It was in Odessa back then. I'll see you at 4, said Maria. 8, 9, 10. Even evening has left the window into night's horrific filth, grim, Decemberish. The candlesticks cackle and snort at my wasted back. No one could recognize me now. An enormous, sinewy sack, moaning, agonizing. What could this clod want? But the clod wants a lot. Who gives if he's bronzed or if his heart's like a cold scrap of metal? At night you want to hide your clang in softness, in femme. And now, immense, I hunch in the window, melting the pain with my forehead. Will there be love or no? What kind, big or mini? Where would such a body get it? Must be a little Pacific lovey. She jumps back from the car's honking, loves the tiny bells of horse-drawn buggies. On and on, pressing into the rain, my face flush against its pockmarked face, I wait, sprayed by the thunder of urban waves. Midnight, pacing with knife in hand, caught up and flayed him. Get out! The 12th hour has fallen, like the head off an executioner's block. On the window pane, howling as one, gray droplets of rain gargantuated a grimace, as if chimeras howling in the Parisian cathedral of Notre Dame. Damned woman, what, isn't that enough? Soon screaming will shred my mouth. Listen. Quiet, like a sick man from his bed, a nerve jumps to and out. First leisurely walking, step by step, then races, getting worried, exacting, now joined by a new pair, back and forth, in a desperate soft shoe it paces. The plaster collapses one floor below. Nerves, big ones, little ones, myriad, jumping mad, and straightaway their nerve legs give out beneath them. But night mires and mires around the room. The eye, heavy laden, can't pull itself out of the filth. Suddenly, the doors trembled as if the hotel had teeth to chatter with. You walked in, blatant, like, take it, torturing your gloves swayed. You know something? I'm getting married. Well, then get married. I'll be okay. See how calm I am? My pulse, a dead man's. Remember, you used to say, Jack London, money, love, passion, and all I saw was you. A Gioconda that's got to be stolen. And it was. In love again, I'll go out gambling, blasting fire on the bends of brows. What of it? Sometimes homeless hobos live in a burnt-out house. You're teasing? You've got fewer emeralds of madness than a pauper kopecks in his pocket. Remember this. Pompeii perished when Vesuvius was mocked. Hey, ladies and gents, amateur collectors of blasphemies, crimes, carnage, have you seen what's most frightening of all? My face when I am absolute calm. And I sense I've grown out of I. Somebody's stubbornly trying to break out of me. Hi, who is it? Mommy? Mom, your son is wonderfully ill. Mom, his heart's on fire. Tell my sisters, Luda and Oля, he's done for, every word. Even a wisecrack that belches from his smoldering hole like a naked whore throws herself out of a blazing bordello. The crowd sniffs it out, smells like a barbecue. Rounded some up. They glitter in helmets. Boots aren't allowed. Tell the fireman a burning heart has climbed in caresses. I'll do it myself. My teary eyes I'll pump out by the bucket. Let me lean up against my ribs. I'll leap out, 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 collapsed. You can't leap out of a heart. From the crack of lips on a smoldering face, a charred kissy kiss rose up to spring. Mom, I can't sing. The choir loft in this heart's little church is ablaze. From my skull, like children out of a burning tenement, come burnt little figures of words and numbers, so fear outstretched the Lusitania's flaming hands to grab the sky by the collar. The 100-eyed blaze tears from the pier to reach out to the people trembling in apartment quiet. The final screech, you at least, moan out into the centuries that I am on fire.
The revolution was a psychological imperative. He was a born rebel. It was in his temperament. At the same time, he was alienated. He felt desolate, and he needed some certitudes. I would say that much of his life was spent in the search for refuge from this pain that hounded him. And he sought it in the absolutes of his time, the revolution, communism, and, when they failed him, in death. Commentary by Patricia Blake from the BBC radio program.
This is my version of Mayakovsky's Getting Along with Horses. Hooves struck like song, clip, clop, clep, clop. The wind stripped street an ice-shod slide. A horse crashed on its rump, and right away, one slack jaw after another came down Kuznetsky in bell-bottoms to have a look-see. Crowding round, a jingle-jangle of laughter. Horse fell! Fallen horse! All Kuznetsky Street laughed, except for me. I didn't mix my voice into that howl. I walk up, and I see the horse eyes. The street toppled over, flowing how it likes. I walk up, and I see, drop from drop, rolling down its face, burrowing in its hide, and some kind of common animal anguish splashed and poured out of me and dissolved in a rustle. Horse, please don't. Listen to me, horse. Do you think you're any less than they are? Little one. All of us are horses, sort of. Every one of us a horse in his own way. Maybe the nag didn't need a nanny. Maybe she thought my notion seemed a little stale. But the horse gave a jerk, stood on its legs, neighed, and off she went, flicking its tail, chestnut, childlike, came home cheerful, stood in its stall, and the whole time she felt like a colt, and life was worth living, and work worthwhile.
I once asked Mayakovsky when he found time to write his poems. He used to spend days filming, evenings in cafes or somewhere else. Mayakovsky replied that when he felt like writing, he would find time, and nothing could stop him. It soon happened that in a crucial moment in the filming, which was going on all the time, day after day, Mayakovsky did not appear at the Samarsky Alley. They looked for him in his apartment, in the apartments of all his friends, asked for him in all the places he used to frequent, but they did not succeed in finding Mayakovsky in Moscow. The actors gathered in the morning at the studio. The proprietors were flustered. All work stopped. People wandered around with nothing to do, but the poet soon appeared at the studio, ready to continue filming. "Where have you been, Vladimir Vladimirovich? Where did you get to?" "I worked. I had the need to write a poem, so I found the time. I warned you, remember?" By Evgeny Slavinsky from Poet on the Screen.
I'm Rachel Cohen. Can you hear me? I don't quite understand this, Mike. And you're all so dark.
Maybe
Yes?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Rachel, you could lift it a tiny bit.
I could lift it a little bit, and then you could actually hear me. Yeah. So I wanted to thank Michael. I think it's a beautiful book, and I'm so pleased to be part of it, and so pleased to be here for this reading. And it's true, Mayakovsky has been long out of print, and we need him. So now we've got him. That's great. I'm going to read a slightly longer piece of prose, which is my own. I got interested in where all these people lived. You've heard a lot of their names already, Osip and Lily Brick and Victor Shklovsky, and there were others too. But all around Mayakovsky, all these Russian poets were living in all of these very bare post-revolutionary apartments. And I was trying to imagine them, so that's what this piece is about. It's called Some Stage Sets for Mayakovsky. And this is pieces of it only. They believed that there would be a future reader to whom their life would seem strange, even unknowable. In the play The Bedbug, Mayakovsky imagined a Russian like himself but named Persipkin, who, together with a bedbug, was unfrozen half a century into the future and caged at a future zoo. Mayakovsky said in the stage directions that the cage should look like a standard-issue Soviet apartment. In the top of the cage, a lamp with a yellow shade. Above Persipkin's head, a radiant halo consisting of postcards arranged fan-wise. Persipkin and the bedbug would live under the light of the yellow lamp, and the people of the future, that's us, would come to stare. Victor Shklovsky wrote of how Moscow looked when Mayakovsky first arrived. Above Moscow ran wires, cutting across the slim necks of the bell towers. The narrow Sobolyevek, the prostitutes' quarter, merged with the ring of the Sadovayas. Above it, the streetcar wires crossed their sparks. The future reader would like to be familiar with the places where they lived, but feels that they were probably right, that this is unknowable, and she tries not to be an American peering down through the crossed wires at the Moscow Zoo. In Petersburg, before the revolution, Ossip and Lily Brick lived on Zhukovsky Street in an apartment that had an empty door frame between its rooms, and once Mayakovsky stood in the doorway and leaned against the frame and recited a cloud in pants. Lily Brick said that they had the feeling that all the poetry around seemed pointless. The wrong people were writing on the wrong subjects in the wrong way. And then, hearing Mayakovsky, suddenly the right person was writing in the right way about the right subject. At the house on Zhukovsky Street, they loved to play cards. Mayakovsky invented games everywhere he went. He always played for money, and if he had any. And when the Bricks were really playing cards, they would hang a sign on the door that said, "The Bricks are not receiving today." And if Gorky came over, he played too. Mayakovsky was in love with Lily Brick and later would live with the Bricks. And Victor Shklovsky said that the way they lived there was, "We will find, together with mankind, the only simple and happy answer." That was how they lived at Zhukovskaya Street 7, and meanwhile the war went on, dragging us along. Mayakovsky entered the revolution as he would his own home, Shklovsky said, and in 1917 the Bricks moved to a 6-room apartment on the same staircase. Mayakovsky was then filming in Moscow, and he used to visit Petersburg, and he brought Lily Brick a rug with an embroidered scene of ducks on it. Shklovsky described how Opoyas, the organization of the formalists, had its first meeting in the Bricks' old apartment, the abandoned apartment. We used books to make a fire, but it was cold, and Piast kept his feet in the oven. Opoyas met every week in virtual darkness by the light of the tiny round yellow flame of a night lamp. Now they move. In Moscow, Mayakovsky had a study on Lubyansky Passage. Across the passage were 2 men who had a razor, a Gillette razor, and Mayakovsky would go over every morning and use it. This Elsa Triolet, who was the sister of Lily Brick, stayed in that room in the Lubyansky Passage in 1925 when Mayakovsky was in Mexico and the United States in Paris, and she described it this way. A single window onto the courtyard, the paper on the walls dark, like the great desk perpendicular to the window, the light to the left, and a narrow cot covered by a black, slippery oilcloth. The place was warm and harsh, and it always smelled a little of a grocery. At the end, the Bricks and Mayakovsky moved to Jendrikov Lane. They left the walls bare there, except for 2 blankets that Mayakovsky had brought from Mexico and the embroidered ducks. Those come up a lot in the research. Lily Brick said of this place, "There was a bath, which we'd been deprived of for so long and which we loved as if it were a living creature. It was so small that it's amazing that Vladimir Vladimirovich could get into it." This house was the last literary salon of the Bricks, and Shklovsky there quarreled with Lily Brick, he said, about some utterly petty nonsense. Literary salons no longer had a reason to exist, but we were unaware of this and constantly cross with one another. Later, this house was made into a Mayakovsky museum, and later still, when it was important for the purity of the revolution to establish the legend of Mayakovsky apart from the Jewish Bricks, this museum was moved to the Lubyansky Passage, where it took up 4 floors. Shklovsky remembered a striped wool Mexican scarf in soft colors hanging near Mayakovsky's body in the Lubyansky Passage when Mayakovsky shot himself. Pasternak came then and saw how all along the staircase people were, as he said, hurled and splashed against the walls by the destructive force of the event. Pasternak could not weep until he heard again the voice he knew in the grieving of Mayakovsky's sister. Mayakovsky's own voice cried out indignantly, strangely transmuted by his sister's contralto. To make it more amusing, she said, they laughed, they called for him, and this is what was happening to him. Why didn't you come to us, Volodya? They lived in small, cold rooms through the Russian winters. They drank coffee made from grilled barley. Specialists in Persian literature found ways of frying horse meat in soap. Mayakovsky had light cigars when he could get them. Futurism was a house with a red-haired dog, a Mexican blanket, and thin paper for printing magazines. At the home of formalism, they burned butterfly cases, and even the exiled felt cheerful. There are dark shapes building fires. There seem to be people painting on the floor, but looking again, the rooms are empty. Later, there were very few of them left. Thanks.
An extraordinary adventure that happened to Vladimir Mayakovsky one summer at a dacha. Sunset swarmed in 140 suns as summer rolled into July. There was the heat, the swimming heat. This all happened in the countryside. Pushkino's foothill, humpbacked with Shark Hill, and below the hill there was a village, a crust of crooked roofs. Beyond the village was a hole, and in that hole, most likely, the sun sank down each time, so faithfully and slowly. But tomorrow, once again, to flood the world, the sun would rise up scarlet, and day by day, this very thing began to make me furious. And one time, so enraged was I that all things paled in fear. I shouted at the sun, point blank, "Get over here! Stop your loafing in that pitch hole!" I shouted at the sun, "Old sponger, caressed by clouds you are, while here, winter or summer, I sit and draw these posters." I shouted at the sun, "Just you wait, listen here, golden brow, instead of setting aimlessly, come by, have tea with me." What have I done? I'm dead. Coming toward me of his own good will, the sun himself, in wide beaming strides, strode across the field. Don't want to show that I'm scared. I saunter backwards, casual. His eyes are in the garden now, in windows, doors, through cracks he came, piled in, a sunny mass, poured in, and with a deep breath it spoke in basso. "I drive the fires back for the first time since creation. You called me? Boil some tea, poet. Spread out some jam, I say." Tears in my eyes, out of my mind from the heat, but I showed him to the samovar and said, "Well then, have a seat, you luminary." Devil made me, raked my arrogance to shout at him like that. Confused, I sat on a bench corner, scared. Things could get worse. But from the sun, a strange radiance streamed, and formalities forgotten, I'm sitting, chatting with the luminary freely. I talk of this, of that, how I've been swallowed up by poster work, but the sun says, "All right, don't get fired up, just look at things more simply. Take me, you think it's easy shining on like this? Go ahead and try it. You move along the sky, since move you must, you move and shine your eyeballs out." We blabbed like that till it got dark, till what was night once, that is. For what darkness was there here? We were familiar with each other, easy, free. And soon, since friendship never melts, I slap him hearty on the back, and the sun does me the same. "Me and you, comrade, quite a pair we make. Let's get out there, poet. Let's dawn and sing before this gray mess of a world. I'll pour my sunny heart out, and you, your own, in verse." A wall of shades, a jail of nights fell under the double-barreled suns. A stir of rays and verse, shine all you've got. And if he gets tired and wants a night of rest, dull sleepyhead, that's when I shine with all my might. And day rings out again. Shine all the time, shine everywhere until the plunging end of days, to shine to hell and back. Here is my motto for you, my slogan, and the sun's. Translated by Val Vinicore.
There's an ample amount of contemporary testimony about Mayakovsky and his reading style at public events. He was a genuine stentor, and then these were in the days, where most halls wouldn't have been electrified, so he wouldn't have had the use of a microphone. And I was just reading the other day about a event in 1926 at the Polytechnical Museum in Moscow, and he was on stage haranguing the crowd, and it was a packed audience, and this fat man leaps on stage and begins to, well, first he denounces him as a gigantomaniac, which I have no idea what it is, but I would love to be denounced in that way, so, or to denounce somebody in that way. That would be fine too. This kind of thing was happening, I guess, continually in revolutionary Russia. And the man said, and Comrade Mayakovsky would be well reminded of the apothegm known even to Napoleon Bonaparte, that between the sublime and the ridiculous is but a single step. And Mayakovsky laughed, and somewhere Shklovsky describes Mayakovsky's laugh as the barking of a brass dog. He took an enormous step towards him, and he said, "Yes, you see, comrade, from the sublime to the ridiculous, a single step." So, to recapture, but you can hear the repetition of sounds, the tremendous basso ostinato of Mayakovsky's voice embedded in his works. And here I'm going to read a passage from How Verses Are Made, from 1926, at which he examines where some of that principle comes from. I walk along, waving my arms and mumbling almost wordlessly, now shortening my steps so as not to interrupt my mumbling, now mumbling more rapidly in time with my steps. So the rhythm is trimmed and takes shape, and rhythm is the basis for any poetic work, resounding through the whole thing. Gradually, individual words begin to ease themselves free of this dull roar. Several words just jump away and never come back, and others hold on, wriggle and squirm a dozen times over, until you can't imagine how any word will ever stay in its place. This sensation, developing with experience, is called talent. Where this basic dull roar of a rhythm comes from is a mystery. Rhythm is the fundamental force, the fundamental energy of verse. You can't explain it. You can only talk about it, as you do about magnetism and electricity. The rhythm can be the same in a lot of poems, even in the whole oeuvre of a poet, and still not make the work monotonous, because a rhythm can be so complex, so intricately shaped, that even several long poems won't exhaust its possibilities.
"1925. I finished the novel in my head, but never transferred it to paper, because while finishing it was penetrated with disgust for the imagined, and began demanding for myself that it be based on names and facts. Actually, this is also true for 26 and 27.
1926. I consciously try to be more of a newspaper journalist in my work. Article, headline. The poets ramble, but they can't write concise journalism. They just publish in the supplements without any social responsibility. For me, their lyrical bullshit is laughable, since it's so easy to do this sort of thing and no one takes any interest in it, except their spouses. My second job, continuing in the interrupted tradition of minstrels and troubadours, go from town to town giving readings. Novocherkassk, Vinnytsia, Kharkov, Paris, Rostov, Tiflis, Berlin, Kazan, Tula, Prague, Leningrad, Moscow, Voronezh, Yalta, Eupatoria, Vyatka, Ufa, etc., etc., etc.
From Homeward. Why, in rainy foreign parts, am I to soak and rot? I really don't know. I am lying somewhere beyond the seas. Parts of my mechanism are barely vibrating. I feel I am a Soviet factory producing happiness. I want my native country to understand me, and if it doesn't, I will bear that too. I will pass sideways over my country like a sidelong rain. Translated by Christopher Edgar. Still me. So, From Them, a memoir of parents by Francine Duplessis Gray. The last months of 1928 had marked the ascendance of Joseph Stalin to unchallenged power in the Communist Party hierarchy and the beginning of his violent transformation of Soviet society. This revolution from above, as it is called, also enabled the Soviet Union's most oppressive literary faction, the Russian Association of Proletarian Writers, or RAP, to gain ascendance over literature. In December of 1929, an editor in the Communist Party paper Pravda demanded that all Soviet writers support RAP and adopt its edicts, which required a strict adherence to proletarian values and the elimination of all bourgeois and deviationist writing. This is the context within which Mayakovsky, in the early fall of 1929, was either denied a visa to return to Paris to resume his courtship of my mother, or else warned that he should not even risk the political dangers of asking for one. Mayakovsky's last months brought a succession of heartbreaks. His play, The Bathhouse, a violent attack on the increasingly rigid Soviet bureaucracy that, in his view, was betraying the 1917 revolution, was received with what one eyewitness described as murderous coldness. But the public's animosity was becoming far more personal. Even though he seldom used the car he had sent back for Lily the previous year and had to get her permission each time he wished to borrow it, he was being censured for owning such a luxurious possession. He was even criticized for the pen of foreign make he always carried on him, the Waterman that had been my mother's parting gift. His exhibition, 20 Years of Work, which opened on February 1st, 1930, posters, paintings, graphics, diverse editions of his books, was boycotted by all official writers' groups and was visited almost exclusively by students. He paced the empty rooms with a sad and austere face, arms folded behind him.
On April 11th, 1930, for the first time in his life, Mayakovsky failed to appear at a reading he had been scheduled to give. On April 13th, he telephoned several friends to see who was free and was pained to hear that they were all busy. Volodya and Nora, Veronika Polonskaya, a young actress, the last woman in Mayakovsky's life, spent the evening writing each other notes on little bits of cardboard torn out of a chocolate box, which Mayakovsky, who drank more than usual that night, tossed across the table to Nora with the gesture of a roulette player. At 3 a.m., they went to their respective homes. In the morning, Mayakovsky came by to pick her up and take her to his apartment. According to Nora's memoirs, they quarreled a great deal. He pressured her to remain with him, while she insisted that she had to go to rehearsal. At 10:15 a.m., barely able to free herself from her lover's grip, Nora ran out of his room. A few seconds later, as she was beginning to go down the corridor, she heard a pistol shot. She hastened back into his room. It was still filled with smoke.
Mayakovsky had been rehearsing this act in his poetry since his adolescence. "It might be far better for me to punctuate my end with a bullet," he had written in 1915. Yet when the suicide actually occurred, it had the impact of a national disaster. Pasternak's analysis of Mayakovsky's suicide is particularly lucid. Mayakovsky shot himself out of pride because he had condemned something in himself with which his self-respect could not be reconciled. The poet's suicide was not as sudden as it initially seemed. He left a note written in pencil in a large, clear hand on 3 pieces of white paper, which he'd apparently started composing 2 days before his death. "Do not blame anyone for my death, and please no gossip. The deceased always detested gossip. Mothers, sisters, friends, forgive me. This is not the way. I do not recommend it to others. But there is no other way out for me."
Past 1 o'clock. Past 1 o'clock. You must have gone to bed. The Milky Way streams silver through the night. I'm in no hurry. With lightning telegrams, I have no cause to wake or trouble you. And as they say, the incident is closed. Love's boat has smashed against the daily grind. Now you and I are quits. Why bother then to balance mutual sorrows, pains, and hurts? Behold what quiet settles on the world. Night wraps the sky in tribute from the stars. In hours like this, one rises to address the ages, history, and all creation. Translated by George Reevy.
It's thrilling to think that in 1925, Mayakovsky might very well have walked down this very street when he was visiting New York. His influence on American poets was considerable. In the examples, I'm thinking notably of Allen Ginsberg and Kenneth Koch and Frank O'Hara, who sometime very late in his life wrote this poem, which is an answer to some degree to the poem that was read earlier about Mayakovsky's conversation with the sun. And this is Frank O'Hara's poem, written probably in the early 1960s, a few years before he died. And Frank's poem is called A True Account of Talking to the Sun at Fire Island. The sun woke me this morning loud and clear, saying, "Hey, I've been trying to wake you up for 15 minutes. Don't be so rude. You're only the second poet I've ever chosen to speak to personally. So why aren't you more attentive? If I could burn you through the window, I would, to wake you up. I can't hang around here all day. Sorry, son. I stayed up late last night talking to Hal. When I woke up Mayakovsky, he was a lot more prompt," the sun said petulantly. "Most people are up already, waiting to see if I'm going to put in an appearance." I tried to apologize. "I missed you yesterday." "That's better," he said. I didn't know you'd come out. You may be wondering why I've come so close." "Yes," I said, beginning to feel hot, wondering if maybe he wasn't burning me anyway. "Frankly, I wanted to tell you, I like your poetry. I see a lot on my rounds, and you're okay. You may not be the greatest thing on earth, but you're different. Now, I've heard some say you're crazy, they being excessively calm to themselves in my mind. And other crazy poets think that you're a boring reactionary. Not me. Just keep on like I do, and pay no attention. You'll find that people always will complain about the atmosphere, either too hot or too cold, or too bright or too dark, days too short or too long. If you don't appear at all one day, they think you're lazy or dead. Just keep right on. I like it. And don't worry about your lineage, poetic or natural. The sun shines on the jungle, you know, on the tundra, the sea, the ghetto. Wherever you were, I knew it and saw you moving. I was waiting for you to get to work. And now that you are making your own day, so to speak, even if no one reads you but me, you won't be depressed. Not everyone can look up, even at me. It hurts their eyes. Oh, son, I'm so grateful to you. Thanks. And remember, I'm watching. It's easier for me to speak to you out here. I don't have to slide down between buildings to get your ear. I know you love Manhattan, but you ought to look up more often. And always embrace things, people, earth, sky, stars, as I do, freely and with the appropriate sense of space. That is your inclination, known in the heavens, and you should follow it to hell if necessary, which I doubt. Maybe we'll speak again in Africa, of which I too am especially fond. Go back to sleep now, Frank, and I may leave a tiny poem in that brain of yours as my farewell. Son, don't go. I was awake at last. No, go I must. They're calling me. Who are they? Rising, he said, someday you'll know. They're calling to you too. Darkly he rose, and I slept. Thank you.
What a fantastic, fantastic night. Michael Almereyda, congratulations not only on a wonderful book, but on a wonderful evocation of Mayakovsky here on the stage. So just like to thank Martha Plimpton and Campbell Scott, Ron Padgett, Matvey Yankelovich. Where's the applause for these guys coming here? Val Vinokur, Clement Joseph, and Rachel Cohen, and of course the marvelous maker of all this, Michael Almereyda, to Farrar, Straus, and Giroux, the publishers, who managed to get this thing out. Books are for sale back here. Poetry Society of America, Alice Quinn here, and all you members for supporting. And of course, Moonshine the bartender. Listen, there's nothing more happening here until 10 o'clock when we've got the Odebra twins, the best open mic in New York will be here. You're welcome to try at your own inner Mayakovsky here at that point. Until then, please hang out, talk to each other, mix, mingle, and buy the book. Thanks again.